Hare Krishna, good morning dear devotees from Sri Jagannath Puri Dham. These are our adventures in Srimad Bhagavatam. And today we're starting our 72nd session we're calling Meeting in Kurukshetra. This is the 25th section of Bhramara-gita, and today we're speaking something about the independent thinking of the Gopis. So we'll begin with a few prayers. Goragraganya gana gotra goloduharam Goranga gudatama gopyata kolpa briksham Gopala gada ratidam yati singha gora Govinda deshikavaram satatam namami Narayanam namaskrityam naram shaiva narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat Vede Ramayanes Chaiva Purane Bharate Tata Adavante Chamadye Chahari Sarvatra Giyate Mukam Karoti Vachalam Bangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam Paramananda Madhavam Paramananda He Madhava Padunga Luchi Makaranda Se Makaranda Panakori Anande Bolo Hari Hari Harinka Name Vandavela Parikoribe chakadola Se chakadolanka padaye Manamo rahu nirantare Manamo nirantare rahu Ha Krishna Boli jiva jao Ha Krishna Boli Jao Jiva Moteu Dada Radha Dava Moteu Dada Radha Dava Moteu Dada Radha Dava Dharma Projita Kaita Vota Paramo Nimatsranam Satam Vedyam Vastavamatta Vastu Shivadam Tapatrayon Mudanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamune Kute Kim Vadaipi Ishvara Sadyo Hridyavarudyate Chukutibi Shushu Shubhistakshanat Nigama Kolpataro Galitam Phalam Shukamukadamitra Dravasam Yutam Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam Mohoroho Rasika Bhuvi Bhavuka. Hare Krishna, good morning dear devotees. My name is Madhav Nandadas. These are our daily sessions in Bhagavatam. And today is our 72nd session in Meeting in Kurukshetra. And we're going to speak a little something today from the Bhramara-gita, especially from Jiva Goswami's Gopal Champu and from some different commentaries on the 47th chapter of the 10th canto. I want to encourage anybody who's watching to please give some feedback. If you have any reflections, something that you like, something that struck you, or any questions, go ahead and post them. So I'd like to look back a little bit. We were speaking from Gopal Champu of Srila Jiva Goswami and how Srimati Radharani was speaking in a harsh way to the bumblebee in her her sulky, loving anger to Krishna. And then she felt bad. Oh, the bee left, and Radharani thought it was because of her. So then she began to speak in a very humble, sweet way. And we've been discussing something about that in our last couple sessions, about the importance of friendship and different types of friendship. So then Srimati Radharani, the bee comes back and she tells the bee, understanding from the bee that Krishna was living happily in Mathura, Radharani then asked, does he remember his father Nanda Maharaj and his friends, the cowherd boys? The 21st verse in this 47th chapter describes the words of Radharani. Api bhatta madhu Puyamaya putro dunaste smarati sapitri gehan somya bandumscha gopan kvachit api sakata nakinkarinam grinite bujam aguru sugandamudjana dasyat kadanu. Srimati Radharani said, O Uddhava, it's indeed regrettable that Krishna resides in Mathura. Does he remember his father's household affairs? He's Aryaputra, the son of Nanda Maharaj. Does he remember these things? Does he remember Gopan Kvachit? Just sometimes does he remember Bandhun Gopan Kvachit, his cowherd friends? Does he ever talk about us? Will he ever lay on our heads his guru-scented hand? Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his Sarta Darshani commentary gives a wonderful discussion here. How Srimati Radharani was thinking to herself that I've been speaking to this bumblebee in my madness, but I've been chastising him and saying so many harsh things, but I didn't ask the questions that I should have asked. So then Radharani felt somewhat remorseful, and she reverentially spoke this verse in a very sweet way. Radharani's mood is kind of like a roller coaster, up and down, or like the waves in an ocean. And she's asking then, so is the noble son of Nanda Maharaj, is he still there in Mathura? And just as Krishna, he left Braj, will he also leave Mathura? Radharani didn't ask if Krishna was happy there, Vishwanath comments, but simply asked if he was there, because Radharani knows how can Krishna be happy without the residents of Vrindavan, and especially without the gopis. So then Radharani thought to herself, because Krishna was once satisfied in Braj, but he left for Mathura, maybe he's also going to have some desire to leave Mathura and go somewhere else. But at least Mathura, it's very close to Vrindavan. And so it's possible Krishna might even come back here. Krishna, he's the son of this respectable gentleman, our king of Braj, Nanda Maharaj. So he must be staying in Mathura out of some obligation to his father, because Nanda Baba authorized his going there. But on the other hand, since Nanda Maharaj, his whole life is dedicated exclusively to Krishna, Nanda is so innocent that he allowed himself to be tricked by the members of the Yadu dynasty who brought Krishna to Mathura. Krishna must be thinking to himself, my father couldn't bring me back to Braj. So what can I do? How can I return to Braj? So Krishna, Radharani's thinking, must be very impatient to come back here to Vrindavan. And that's why he sent you, my dear bumblebee, as a messenger. Right? And Radharani, in her madness, thinking to herself, she's thinking that it's only because Nanda Maharaj is so innocent, he's so naive that he allowed Krishna to leave. If Nanda Maharaj had allowed Krishna's mother, Yashoda, to do so, she would have immediately climbed on Akura's chariot. And she would have held her son around the neck, and she would have gone to Mathura with him. And all the gopis would have followed. Radharani thought, but this is not possible. So Radharani's thinking that ever since Krishna left, Nanda Maharaj has been stunned in ecstasy and separation from Krishna, and his treasure rooms, his storehouses, his kitchens, the sleeping quarters, and all the different parts of the house are all unkept. Nobody's been sweeping. They're all littered with spider webs and dust and cobwebs and things. Does Krishna ever remember his father's houses? Does Krishna sometimes remember Subal and Madhu Mangal and his other friends who are now laying stunned in other neglected houses? Everyone's houses in Mathura all become neglected. Sometimes it's said that after Krishna left Vrindavan, Mother Yashoda just stood there, stunned in ecstasy, looking down the road where Krishna had left and waiting for her son to return. And it's said that by her Guru Maharaj sometimes that Mother Yashoda's oven, her stove, was now covered over with cobwebs. And all the residents of Vrindavan, they'd stopped eating out of separation from Krishna. So Vishwanath describes the mad thoughts of Radharani and how she's thinking to herself, the ladies in Mathura, they don't know how to serve Krishna in a way that pleases him the most. When they see that he's not satisfied and they ask how can they make him happy, does Krishna speak about us gopis at that time? Krishna must tell them that you city ladies, you can't please me as much as the gopis of Braj. The gopis of Braj, they're the most expert personalities in all the three worlds in making garlands and putting fragrant ointments on their bodies and dancing in different ways and playing musical instruments, singing in the Ras Leela. There's no ladies in all the three worlds who can equal the gopis in terms of their beauty, their charm, their cleverness, right? Their expertise in arranging a meeting between myself and Radharani. Right? Krishna must know all this, Radharani's thinking to herself. Therefore, Krishna must tell those ladies of Mathura, my dear ladies, please go back to your families. I'm not attracted to associating with you. Just today, just this morning, immediately, I'm leaving for Braj. It must happen. Radharani's thinking like this. Radharani's thinking, when will Krishna speak like this and come back here to put his hand, which is fragrant, with a guru incense on our head? That a guru incense is very, very nice. So many different types of incense. They've managed to find artificial ways to smell it. Just like if you purchase vanilla, most vanilla that you purchase is some chemical thing which they make from cardboard. It's not actually real vanilla. So similarly, the rose scent and different scents, they've found different artificial ways to imitate it. But a guru is one thing they haven't found a way to imitate. And that a guru is a very, very wonderful fragrance. So Radharani's thinking that Krishna, his hand is fragrant with this guru. When will he put that hand on our heads again? And then he'll console us and he'll say, my dear beloveds, I swear that I'll never give you up again. I'll never leave you. I've not been able to find any ladies in all the three worlds who have even a tiny fragrance of your good qualities. And then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says a very nice thing. He says, Atra chicha jalpa pralapana madhurja shravana kantaya Krishna eva Bhramara-rupena. That this sweetness, this chicha jalpa pralapa madhurja, this sweetness of Radharani's pralap and chitra jalpa, her mad talks, shravana kantaya Krishna eva Bhramara-rupena, that Krishna, some people say, he took the form of the bee. That bee was actually Krishna. And he came there, Krishna eva Bhramara-rupena. He took that form to come and listen to the madness of Srimati Radharani's Chitra Jalpa. You may have some doubts about that. But from another perspective, we could say, how could it be otherwise? Just as we were commenting recently, sometimes Krishna, he acts like he's asleep. And while he's faking that he's asleep, sometimes the gopis are coming to steal his flute, but they're a little nervous. Is he really asleep? Is he not asleep? And sometimes the gopis, they're speaking amongst themselves about Krishna, and Krishna gets so much pleasure hearing the gopis talk about him. And when they're thinking that he's asleep. So Krishna, he likes so much to hear the words of Srimati Radharani. And what are those words? That's the origin of kirtan. That's the origin of Krishna Katha. Krishna gets so much pleasure hearing those words of Radha. And Krishna's in the heart of all living entities. So how could he not want to listen to the ears of that bumblebee? And then at that time, Jiva Goswami and Gopal Champu says that the bee seemed to agree with her. And then Radharani gave up her reservation. She asked, does he ever talk about us, his maidservant? Kvachidapi rahasi sammutam asmaniseva virachita charavesham vikshachaitad bravati api brata paricharya karika hanta namuhu smarasya rasidure napmana sadam eshi. Radharani was thinking like this. Jiva Goswami says that sometimes Kvachit api rahasi swam. Rahasi means in a private place. Swam murtam asman niseva, saying that he's dressed nicely in clothes that were made by us, made by the gopis of Vrindavan. Virachiti charavesham vikshachaita bhavati. Apivata paricharya karika hantam. Does a bee sometimes speak to Krishna? And does a bee say, Smarasi yadasi duri natmanasodamesi? Sometimes, do you remember? Smarasi, do you remember those servants, those maidservants, the gopis? And does the bee sometimes tell Krishna, although you're far away, you should meet with him? Radharani's madness is increasing more and more. Not only does she think that the bumblebee is a messenger from Krishna, start chastising the bumblebee, now she's meditating, she's thinking, she's imagining conversations between the bumblebee and Krishna. So, in the 23rd verse of the 47th chapter, Uddhava is speaking now to the gopis, and he's reflecting. Now he's digested to some extent. He's seen the madness, the pralap of the Chitra Jalpa Srimati Radharani, and that's being reflected in the comments of Uddhava. So in this 47th chapter, in this 23rd verse, Uddhava says, Aho yuyamma sma purnarta bhavacho loka pujitaha vasudeve bhagavati asam ityarpitam manaha. Uddhava said that, my dear gopis, aho, it's such an astonishing thing that you gopis, you're pujita, you're universally worshipped, loka pujita, you're worshipped by everyone. Because, he says that yasam iti arpita mana, yasam iti arpita mana, your minds are completely focused on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he comments, Anyesam api bhaktanam, amongst all the different bhaktas, amongst all the different devotees, mano bhagavati arpitam jidam, all of them, they offer their minds to Krishna. But kint evam prakarena tu nadristam iti bhavaha. But we don't see, kinta means but no, we don't see anyone else who offers their minds in the same way to Krishna. Jiva Goswami, in his Vaishnava Toshani, comments on this verse. He says, Manasa swatantrena karma katritva bodhan artam. He explains that this statement in this verse, Yasam ityarpita mana, it indicates that the minds of the gopis were satantra, that they were independent. They were independent thinkers. What does it mean? As Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, so many other devotees, all devotees, they offer their minds to the Lord. He says, but kintu, evam prakarena tuna dristamiti bhavaha. We don't see their minds offered in the same way that the gopis do. So Jiva Goswami explains it that because the gopis' minds are independent. What is that independence? What does it mean? The next verse in the 47th chapter discusses Dana Bratatapo Homa Japa Swadhyaya Samyamai Shreyo Bir Vividaishchainya Krishna Bhaktir Hi Sadyate. Uddhava is continuing. And Uddhava is saying that bhakti to Krishna, Krishna bhakti, he sadyate, it's realized, it's attained, it's done by dana, by giving some charity, brata, by performing strict vows, by tapa, austerities, homa, doing fire sacrifices, doing japa, swadhyaya, reading Vedic literatures, samyamai means following some regulated principles, shreyobi, they're doing some auspicious practices, vividai, these are all the different types of ways that someone may worship Krishna. So now, what is this verse speaking? The previous verse speaks, Uddhava is saying that, my dear gopis, you're offering your mind to Krishna. And Vishwanath and Jiva Goswami explain that they're offering their minds in an extraordinary way, in a way that we haven't seen any other devotees offer their minds. Although all devotees offer their minds to Krishna. But Jiva Goswami gives a little further explanation. He says, they're swatantrena. Their minds, they're independent thinkers. So how do the gopis think independently? This 24th verse we're just reading describes Uddhava saying that Dana Bretta Tapa Homo, that most people, this is how they approach the Lord. They're doing all these different things. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he explains in his commentary on this verse that these different bhakti angas, these are the ways most people, they worship the Lord. And these things, generally we may not always think that dana, giving charity, means for Krishna, but here he says it means Tatra Danam Vishnu Vaishnava Sampradhanakam. That when we give charity, especially we give charity to the devotees, to the Vaishnavas, and to the Lord. Bratam means Ekadashadikam. It means that you're performing Ekadasi Brata. Tapa means Krishnartha Bhoga Tyagadi, that you give up some bhoga, you give up some sense enjoyment for Krishna's sake. Homa Vaishnavaha, it means you do some sacrifice, you do Vaishnav Homa, you do some Homa for the pleasure of the Lord. Japa Vishnu Mantranam, Japa means that you're chanting some mantra for the pleasure of the Lord. Swadhyayo Gopala Tapanyadi Pataha, Vishwanath says, that Swadhyaya, which means studying Vedic literatures or reciting Vedic literatures, means studying literatures like the Gopal Tapanya Upanishad. So Jiva Goswami says that all these auspicious acts like dana, giving charity, and gyan and sankhya, yoga, they're successful when they're offered to Krishna. And then they become somewhat bhakti. So why is Uddhava speaking this verse? He's speaking now about the way most people worship the Lord. Most people, they do this dana, brata, tapa, homa. Even I've seen Gaudiya Vaishnavas sometimes are really into doing homa or yajna. I'm not so much attracted by this, as we once mentioned when we were doing a fire sacrifice for Narendra Maharaj, for initiation ceremony, that Gaudiya Vaishnavas, they don't generally spend so much time doing homa. Why? How many devotees' homes have you gone to where you see a picture of a sacred fire on the wall? Devotees don't do that. How many times on the internet do they send a picture? Here's a darshan of the sacred fire today. But everybody shares pictures and paintings, pictures of the deities, things, because there's some form, there's some service that we can render them. What kind of service can you render to a fire sacrifice? When you're doing a fire sacrifice, it indicates, it means that I'm doing this because I want something from you. But when we're worshiping the deity, that's for the Lord's pleasure. We're dressing him in a way that he wants, which will give pleasure to him. So, Jiva Goswami, commenting on this verse, he says, Savai Pumsam, he quotes this verse from 1st Canto Bhagavatam, Savai Pumsam Paro Dharmo Yato Bhaktir Hoksajay, Ohaitakiya Pratiyata Yayatma Supersediti. That this is real bhakti, this is a standard of bhakti. First of all, it should be offered to the Lord, but it should be Ohaitaki Apratiyata, without any motivation, without ever stopping, Yayatma Supersediti, to fully please the Lord. And then Jiva Goswami quotes a verse, 2 verses later in the same chapter, the 1st canto, Dharma Swanustita Pumsam Vishvakshena Katasuya Nat Podiyad Yadi Ritim Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam. And he's speaking about all this dana, brata, tapa, all these different things. And Jiva Goswami is quoting this verse, which says that you may do all these different types of dharma, but if they don't give you some kata ruchi, some attraction for Krishna kata, then shama eva hi kevalam, they're just a complete waste of time. So indirectly here, Jiva Goswami is indicating the mood of the gopis. Now let's go to the next verse, the 25th verse of this chapter. And Uddhava is elaborating a little bit more. Why it is, what does it mean that the gopis, they're independent thinkers. What does it mean that the gopis are offering their mind in a way that other people don't do? So first of all, Uddhava says, most people, they're doing this dana, breta, tapa, homa, japa, swadhyaya. They're doing all these things. But you gopis, he says in the 25th verse, Bhagavat utama shloke bhavatebir anutama bhakti pavartita drisya muninam api durlabha. He says, my dear gopis, you've done something which is muninam api durlabha, very hard even for great sages to attain. You gopis, your anutama bhakti, your devotion to Krishna is unexcelled. Nobody has bhakti like yours. So this is an important point. Now Uddhava is indicating to the gopis, he's seen the madness of Radha, the madness of the gopis. He also saw Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda. But it's the love of the gopis which astonishes Uddhava. And by saying this word pravartita, it indicates, pravartita means to establish something. That the gopis, Uddhava is saying that you gopis, you've raised the bar. You've made a standard of pure love of God that previously was unheard of anywhere. So then Uddhava begins to glorify them. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that Uddhava is saying, Bhavati nam bhaktis tvananyayeva sarva vilakshaniti aha. That your bhakti, that you have, it's different from all other types of bhakti because you've established this most astonishing bhakti which has been unknown anywhere else in the world. And your bhakti that you're practicing, this is going to make an astonishing impact on the world. It's for the good fortune of the people in general. So this is a purport, this is a point. Can I have your keyboard, Krishna Kun? This is a point of this 47th chapter of the 10th canto, which speaks about the love of the gopis in their ecstasy and separation, their mad talks of this bumblebee. And this chapter, as we mentioned a number of times, it's so important in Gaura Leela. So this 25th verse, Uddhava is telling the gopis, he's predicting something in the future. That your love, because it's a Nutama Bhakti, that nobody else has bhakti like you. Pravartita, you've established, you've raised the bar. What you've done, just showing your love, is going to make an impact on the world in general. And what does that mean? That indicates Gauranga Mahaprabhu. As the poet Basu Ghosh has discussed in one song, Jadi Gora Nahito Tabike Hoito Kemoni Dari Tamde Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Radharani Mahima Prema Rasa Singha Jagate Janato Ke Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jadagora na hoito, tabiki hoito, kemoni daritam de. If Gauranga Mahaprabhu had not come, Jadi means if, that Mahaprabhu, na hoito, he'd not come here, kabiti hoito, then what would have happened? Kemoni. What would have happened to us? Kemoni daritam de. How would we be able to maintain our lives? But Radhara Mahima Prema Rasa Singha Jagati Janatoke. Gauranga Mahaprabhu, he came and he brought this Radhara Mahima, this glories of Radharani's love. And how did he do that? By hearing from this 47th chapter of the 10th canto, from the lips of Roy Ramananda and Sri Damodar Goswami. He glorified the gopis in this way. Krishna left Vrindavan. He put the gopis of Braj in this divyonmada, this divine state of ecstasy and separation. And if he hadn't left, how would we have known about the love of the gopis? If the gopis had never spoken this Bhramara-gita, how would we know the extent of their love? And even though they'd spoken this, if Gauranga Mahaprabhu hadn't come to show us a purport of that love, how would we understand it? So this is the love of the gopis. Their love, as Jiva Goswami describes in his Vaishnav Toshani, is swatantrena. It's independent. Manasat swatantrena literally means independent thinking. This is the nature of the gopis. Everyone else, there's some motivation. Ahoitaki means with no motivation. Everyone else has some motivation. And therefore, Uddhava says, Dana Brata Tapo Homa. Everybody else they're doing for some reason. They're doing this fire sacrifice because they want to have an auspicious wedding. And they're worshiping the Lord for that reason. They're giving some charity because it's a very pious thing to give charity. They're doing some brata so they can control their senses. Everything is about me, me, me. And that's why they're doing all these religious practices. But Jiva Goswami says, Manasa Satatrena. The gopis are independent thinkers. And here, independent thinking means that there's no motivation for their love. It's ahoitiki, apratiyata. It never stops. No podiyad yadivatim shama evahi kevalam. They don't have any other motivation for Krishna, to worship Krishna. They just want to please Krishna. And therefore Radharani is thinking Krishna should return because he can't be happy in Mathura. She's not thinking that I want my happiness. She's not even thinking about the happiness of Lalita or Vishaka or her dear companions. She's thinking of Krishna's happiness. And she's thinking, how can Krishna be happy there with these ladies of Mathura? They don't know anything. So this independent thinking is a nature of the gopis. And this independent thinking on another level is also very important for sadhakas. Bhaktivinoda Thakur has discussed in one article, it was an article called Notes on the Bhagavat. And let me read something to you from the statement of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. It's very astonishing. He says, we love to read a book, which we've never read before. We're anxious to gather whatever information is contained in it. And with that acquirement, our curiosity stops. He says this is the nature of most readers. They're reading to gather information, and when you get that information, then your curiosity stops. And Bhaktivinoda comments on that. This mode of study prevails amongst a great number of readers who are great men in their own estimation, as well as in the estimation of those who are of their own stamp. He says this is a common way of studying amongst most readers who think themselves very great, and people who are like them, they also think they're very great. Wow, that was amazing information. They were quoting from so many different Puranas and from this and from that. It was amazing information. But Bhaktivinoda says, most readers, the fact is that most readers are mere repositories. They're just like a filing cabinet where you put something, some facts and statements made by other people. But Bhaktivinoda says, this is not study. You have a Bhakti Shastri degree. How did you get? Because I memorized all the verses I was supposed to memorize for Bhakti Shastri. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that's not study. He says the student is to read the facts with a view to create, not with the object of fruitless retention. Our purpose is to create. Our purpose is to apply what we've heard, what we've learned, to create something, not with the object of fruitless retention, not just for the purpose of just memorizing something which has no benefit. And Bhaktivinoda goes on in this article in a very brilliant way. He says that students, like satellites, like a satellite in the sky, those satellites, they reflect whatever light they've received from authors, and they don't imprison the facts and thoughts. This is what a real student should be like. They should reflect the light they receive from authors and not put in prison the facts and thoughts. What does it mean to put it in prison? It means you're just memorizing something. So to impress your girlfriend or some person you want to impress. Bhaktivinoda says thought is progressive. The author's thought must have progress in the reader in the shape of correction or development. He is the best critic who can show the further development of an old thought, but a mere denouncer is an enemy of progress. So Bhaktivinoda is saying thought is progressive. We come to the Krishna conscious movement. It's an educational movement. Once one devotee came to my Guru Maharaj and he said something a little startling. He said, Maharaj, I feel very bad. I just can't tolerate living in the temple. And my Guru Maharaj's response was, he said, Hare Baba, how long will you go on living in kindergarten? Now that sounds a little disparaging perhaps for those of you who manage temples or live in the temple. But he also managed the temple, and he encouraged devotees to stay in the temple. But his comment, what does it mean? He's not just criticizing the temple, but he's saying that this is an educational facility. And my Guru Maharaj was a teacher. How many students go to school and spend the rest of their life in the school? They become locked up in the school. Some students stay in the school as administrators or teachers, but they're very few. And they're not the same as the other students. They have a different mood, and they generally go home at the end of the day. Very rarely do they stay in the school, always. Most people, however, they learn something from the school, they graduate, and then they apply what they've gotten in their own personal life. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying this is a real type of study. Thought is progressive. The student is to read the facts with a view to create, not with the object of fruitless retention. He says the author's thought must have progress in the reader in the shape of correction or development. It means we should correct ourselves or we should develop it in a further way. And then he goes on to say he's the best critic. Critic doesn't mean someone who just criticizes, but critic here means someone who's applying critical thinking. He's the best thinker, in other words, who can show further development of an old thought. But a mere denouncer of this thought, he's an enemy of progress. Someone who says, oh, you shouldn't think. Many people, they say like that. There have been many people who are like Stalin and Hitler. They want to go after the intellectuals, the thinkers. And sometimes even amongst religionists, they tell people, this are the rules, this is the way you should think. You shouldn't think any other way. But Prabhupada rejected that. In one lecture on Nectar Devotion in 1973, Prabhupada spoke to the devotees. Listen, he said a very amazing thing. He said, our concept is to become one with God, but not that I become one with God. I agree with God. Krishna says, Sarva Dharma Prityagamami Kam Sharanam Vraja. And I agree, yes sir. So long I was very foolish, now I surrender to you. Prabhupada said, this is oneness, but I keep my individuality. I'm so surrendered, I have nothing to disagree with Krishna. That's oneness. But not that I lose my individuality. I must go on with individuality. That individuality never stopped. That's what it means to have independent thinking. It's very amazing to me. I'd like to read you a little something from a lecture Prabhupada gave in New York City, the 28th of July, 1966. So these are like the brand new people that Prabhupada's speaking to. These are his disciples, his early followers. Prabhupada says, so now you've received this news. It's very pleasing, huh? This Krishna Katha that I'm speaking to you. Now what's your next duty? To Joshanat. Joshanat means to cultivate. Now you try to assimilate it. And what does that assimilation mean? Smarana. Simply by thinking, oh, this has been spoken, that's not enough. Prabhupada told them, these brand new, his followers, says, try to argue whether it is true or not. You have to think it over. What Bhagavad Gita says, you have to think it over. how Swamiji has discussed this matter. Apply your arguments, apply your logic. Don't take it as sentiment or blind faith. You have got reason, you've got arguments. Apply it, try to understand it. This is Srila Prabhupada's desire. This is a desire of Krishna. We have to think. There's 3 stages in bhakti, which Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur discusses in his commentary in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Abhyasa, Manana, and Smarana. Abhyasa means that you just practice. And maybe it's blind. You just practice and cleaning the temple, and you're thinking of your favorite rock song before you join, or your girlfriend, or some movie or something. But after some practice of abhyasa, your mind becomes purified, the temple becomes clean, and when it's clean, you can start to think. That's the level of manana. That now you're changing gears. Just to do abhyasa, practice, is not enough. We have to come to the point of manana. We have to start thinking about, why am I doing this, and what does that why mean? It means, why does Prabhupada want me to clean the temple? Why does Srila Prabhupada want me to dress the deities in a beautiful way? To please the deity. Prabhupada's pleased with that. To glorify the deity, to draw the heart out of the devotees, to draw the heart out of the non-devotees who come to the temple when they see, this is the most clean place I've ever seen. These deities are so beautiful. This is Srila Prabhupada's purpose. We should think about it. Not just that, oh, today's Tuesday, it's ruled by Mars, so I should put red color on the deities, and what red things do they have, and do things in a mechanical way, but we should be thinking. Prabhupada wrote a letter in 1972, a very famous letter to Karandar Prabhu, who at that time practically was the manager, the leader in ISKCON. Prabhupada wrote to him, he said, the Krishna conscious movement is meant for training men, and I think he meant women also, to be independently thoughtful and competent in all departments of knowledge and action, not for making bureaucracy. So he says very clearly, this is the purpose of the Krishna conscious movement, to train people to be independently thoughtful, like the Gopis of Vrindavan. Because we're followers ultimately of the Gopis of Vrindavan. And they're not just mechanically doing something because everybody else says that you should go to take bath in the Jamuna, you should give some charity. No, they're thinking they want to please Krishna. Prabhupada goes on in this letter to say a number of things I'll share with you. He says each center should remain independent. Each center runs so nicely when there's some leader there who inspires everyone with their Krishna Katha, with their kirtan, with their services, with their behavior, with their loving dealings. And in that way, every center should be independent. And Prabhupada said in the same letter, it's very difficult to give up quickly so many bad habits that you have in your country. So you educate people gradually. First with chanting. Don't be so anxious, he said, to count up so many numbers of new devotees. If such devotees go away later, being too early forced, he's probably said, I want to see a few sincere devotees, not many false pretenders, false devotees. And Prabhupada goes on a few paragraphs later, he says, our leaders should be careful not to kill the spirit of enthusiastic service, which is individual, spontaneous, and voluntary. Vaisheshika Prabhu once told us that this is the hidden meaning of ISV. Individual, spontaneous, and voluntary. This is the spirit of enthusiastic service. It should be individual, spontaneous, and voluntary. And Prabhupada tells Karandar, this is what it means to be an expert manager, expert preacher, that we encourage independent thinking. We encourage people to be individual, spontaneous, and voluntary. Again, reading from Srila Prabhupada in Back to Godhead magazine in 1952, before he came to America, Prabhupada said, the present problem confronting human civilization is due to a lack of proper introspection of the goal of human knowledge. This is the problem, a lack of proper introspection. This is our problem. We need to be introspective. Or in the words of St. Francis of Assisi, he once said that what you're looking for is what is looking. What you're looking for is what is looking. You're looking for that consciousness which is doing the looking. That's introspection. And this is wanted. This is what bhakti is all about. Again, Prabhupada writes in the Gita, in his purport to 434, he says, both blind following and absurd inquiries are condemned. One should not only hear submissively from the spiritual master, but one must also get a clear understanding from him in submission and service and inquiries. So blind following is condemned. If we do blind following, then it just becomes what Srila Prabhupada called churchianity. Or in one lecture, Prabhupada said that you're quoting verses like a parrot, but that won't be very beneficial. We have to think about it. We have to practice Vigyan. It's such an important thing. So this Vigyan for Gaudiya Vaishnavas means we want to understand Mahaprabhu. What does it mean to understand Mahaprabhu? It means we should try to understand the mood of the Gopis. And what is their mood is expressed by Uddhava when he's watching him, he's seeing him. He said, my God, you are independent thinkers. This is the root of the Krishna consciousness movement. From the time of the Gopis and the Bhramara-gita and the Bhagavatam, from Gauranga Mahaprabhu, from Srila Prabhupada, from Thakur Bhaktivinoda, devotees must be independent thinkers and not just blind following. That blind following is condemned. So I want to stop there. I notice, I want to thank so many devotees who've been taking part in this today. There's a lot of comments. Let me see. I think Braj Sundari, Brinda Sundari is happy today. Nice to see Natalia here today, and Sachi Tanoi Prabhu, and Prashanta, and Brinda Sundari, and Brajabanita. See, Brinda Sundari, she's commented, I appreciate and value the point you make regarding independent thinking being connected to motivation. To be truly independent in thinking and living means to be free from other motivations besides truth and Krishna. Yeah, Brenda Sundari is a manager, and she knows very well as a manager that as a good manager, most managers, they just want to tell everybody, look, this is what you should do. You should think the way I tell you. And honestly, most people, they just come and they like to be told what to think, because thinking is a little complicated. They would prefer that someone just tells them how they should think, how they should behave. But when the leader comes and tells them, no, I want you to think on your own, to be an independent thinker, it makes people uncomfortable. But this is a point of bhakti. If you're not an independent thinker, you can't really practice bhakti. Again, Brinda Sundari, she's quoting, she says, they don't imprison the facts and thoughts, they reflect the light. Thought is progressive. Thank you for sharing these. Brajabanita's there, Natalia. Brinda Sundari goes on, what is the use of thought and intelligence if it's not used for purposes to progress and raise consciousness and seek truth? Awesome words by the acharyas about the use and purpose of thought. Sometimes devotees, they think, I came from a little bit of an educated family, both my parents were teachers. Sometimes devotees think that Prabhupada's comments about school, Prabhupada said that the schools are slaughterhouses, that schools are very bad. Schools are not all bad. Prabhupada, he went to Scottish Churches College, and it was useful for him. He got tools which he was able to use later on in his service to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, of English and Sanskrit and other things. And one thing that universities teach us, which I think is very important, sometimes they do it a little hypocritically, to be frank, but they teach independent thinking. They teach critical thinking, that you should look at things from different perspectives. Now, the nature of many religions is, if you ask questions, why did the prophet, some people say the prophet had sex with a 4-year-old girl. Why did he do that? And if you ask that question in public, in some places they may come and they may kill you. Many religions, they discourage independent thinking because it's a little messy. It's difficult. How can we, if somebody comes and says, why did Srila Prabhupada say certain things that he did about women? That makes us uncomfortable. Why did Prabhupada say certain things about Hitler? It makes us very uncomfortable. But that that discomfort is good. It makes us think. We have to come up with a good answer. Why is it that in the Krishna conscious movement that the ladies don't lead kirtan or give class? There should be some good answer. We should think about it. I'm not going to comment on that right now. Brajabani, the comments. So wonderful and practical to agree with God, but keep your individuality and not make bureaucracy, in capital letters, she says. Brajabani, to our Brajabani, doesn't like bureaucracy. Huh? Yeah, we want to agree with the Lord, but we keep our individuality. Braja Sundari is saying, I'm celebrating his words. Natalia is commenting. We have a bunch of radicals on here today. Independent equals unmotivational equals love out of free will. The Gopis don't want anything from Krishna. Their desire is to please Krishna is the only purpose of their existence. Thank you, Natalia. And Brajavanita comments, for most people, independent thinking is a real challenge. It's a fact. Honestly, most people, they come, and especially to a religious organization, they just want to be told how to dress, how to behave, what to think, and they think that's what surrender means. I just do what the authorities tell me to do, and I don't think for myself because I'm not independent. But we should be independent. Natalia comments, Krishna became the bumblebee. How else could it be? Krishna loves to hear what the lovers say about himself. Ayatakshi's here. Hare Krishna, Ayatakshi from Italy. So nice to see you. She says, thank you for such an important topic. Our Ayatakshi is an independent thinker. So I want to thank everybody very much for taking part today. If anybody has any last reflections or comments, you can go ahead and make them. Otherwise, we'll be back again the same time, same place next week. And we're going to continue this. We have a topic coming up. I don't know if it'll come in our next session, but it's such an important topic. What does it mean, Uddhava's words to the gopis when he told them that you should be yogis and you should meditate on Krishna, and Krishna is there with you if you meditate on him? What does that mean? It's one of the great mysteries in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. We're going to hear from Jiva Goswami and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Vishwanath's given a very, very elaborate purport about this topic. Very, very important subject to understand in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Any reflections from anybody here in the room? You have anything? You could say in Russian if you want. Krishna Kun could try to translate. Krishna Kun's coming over here. She's limping her way over. Let me give her the mic.
First, I love this point about how Srimati Radharani wants Krishna back in Vrindavan, not for herself, but because Krishna is not able to be happy in Mathura, because those ladies cannot serve him in the way that pleases him the most. So I love that point. Also, I really liked Vinda Sundari's comment, because I also, in my mind, this independent thinking, and Natalia also the same, independent thinking means no motivation, just love, pure love, unmotivated and uninterrupted. And I also thought that this is actually translating even in the material world, that if you have, maybe not the pure love part, of course, unfortunately, but that's why we are here, to be corrected. But the part that independent thinking means no motivation, because every government, every institution, they have a motivation. So when you are able to think independently of what you are told and independently of the institution, it means you are able to find your way to the truth, which is not distorted by someone else's motivation or your own anartha's motivation. I'm very grateful that you found this quote from Srila Prabhupada, where he says that just to remember is not enough. You have to think it over, because I was challenged several times by different devotees when I quoted Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur about not imprisoning the thoughts, because we are taught from the very beginning, because we were such neophytes when Prabhupada came to America. Nobody knew anything about anything, zero culture. So we were taught so many times, don't speculate, just follow, don't think about it, just follow. And it gets to a point that devotees are not able to leave those beginning stages when it's very helpful to be that way. They are not able to leave that behind, and they are not able to think independently. So I was challenged so many times by devotees, so I'm very happy that you found this quote from Srila Prabhupada. And I loved your ending comment about Vijnana means Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That's just a whopper. Hare Krishna.
I want to add a little comment in here too. Independent thinking is very important, and that's our goal. But it's not that you have a 2 or 3-year-old toddler and you're telling him you should be an independent thinker. You know, we're telling you don't eat bleach, don't just put everything in your mouth. But you should be an independent thinker and do what you want. No, there's a certain stage where we should think dependently. Right? We should be trained. But our goal is independent thinking. Our goal is to take the principles, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, and apply them and think in that way. Just like we take glasses and we put the glasses on and we see through those glasses. We want to be Shastra Chakshus and see through the eyes of Shastra. But not just that we take the Shastra and we stick it in front of our face so that that's all that we can see. But rather we see through it, not in a blind way. Okay, so I want to thank everybody very much. It was very inspiring for me to hear all the different reflections and comments from everybody today. And we'll be back again next week to continue this discussion. As Krishna Chaitanya Maharaj says, we're inching our way along to the meeting in Kurukshetra. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Samaveda Bhakta Binda ki jai, Go Premanandi Hari Hari Bol, Vansha